Hi, I'm Grace.
I'm Sophia.
And I'm Hulda, and we're the Quebe Sisters, and you're listening to Musicality Now.
Hi, my name's Christopher. I'm the founder and director of Musical U, and welcome to Musicality Now. Today I'm joined by Hulda, Grace, and Sophia, the Quebe Sisters, a progressive Western swing band that I've been listening to for years, and we've even featured them in Musical U tutorials on harmonic ear training because of their unique style, which features three-voice fiddle playing as well as three-voice vocal harmony. A little while back, when I interviewed solo pianist Michele McLaughlin, she talked about how she and her sister refer to music that really touches them as music that makes your heart hurt. And when she said that, I immediately thought of a Quebe Sisters track, Georgia on My Mind, which, to this day, if I listen to the opening of, there's no better way to say it, it makes my heart hurt, while simultaneously making my ears cheer with delight. You'll hear me talk a bit more about this in the interview, so for now I'll just say, if you're looking for music that's a rich and beautiful environment to explore with your ears, there are few better choices than the Quebe Sisters. The sisters were blowing people away and winning fiddle contests back from an early age, and they've been growing a large and devoted fan base ever since. I was keen, of course, to dig into the backstory of their musicality, and the sisters were honest, open, and generous with what they shared. In this conversation, we talk about the challenges of starting to sing together after years of only playing fiddle, and the one practice habit that was painful but hugely effective for helping them to improve. We talk about how exactly they each think about writing and arranging harmony parts, and the relationship between ear skills and theory. And we talk about what the progressive in progressive Western swing means, and how they've been developing their sound for their new record that's out this week. I feel like it's taboo for an interviewer or a music journalist to make comparisons to the Beatles, and on the surface that may not seem like an obvious comparison to make here, but in this conversation I couldn't help but be struck by several similarities to the standout learning points from our Beatles month here on the show, from how the sisters immersed themselves in a wide range of genres from early on, to how they've clearly absorbed a lot of music theory understanding, whether or not they've formally studied it, how they focus on the editing part of writing and rely on each other to co-write well, and how they're seeking out the very best teachers and artists, even from outside their genre, to learn from. And perhaps above all, how they are inspired and motivated both by each other and by a genuine love of the music they write and play. In my opinion, this is a group to pay attention to, and so I hope you'll enjoy this peek behind the scenes and into the minds of the Quebe Sisters. My name is Christopher Sutton, and this is Musicality Now from Musical U. Welcome to the show, Hulda, Sophia, and Grace. It's really exciting to have you here, and I'm going to try hard not to be too much of a fanboy in this interview. We're very lucky to have amazing guests on the show, but sometimes it's a case where I'm just as enthusiastic personally as I am professionally, and this is one of those cases. I was looking back in preparation for this interview to figure out where did I first come across the Quebe Sisters, and I found an email I had drafted back in 2012 to you, but never sent, which was asking if we could somehow collaborate because your music was so fantastic and really good for ear training. And I was running this little company called Easy Ear Training, and I thought it would be so cool if we could do something. Anyway, I never sent it because I was too nervous and shy to email these amazing musicians I was listening to every day. But the reason I was in that direction was I did end up featuring some of your music in an article we did all about harmonic ear training, because I was finding, you have some of the best tracks for really paying attention to close harmony and trying to follow a certain voice all the way through the track or hear how they interrelate and play together. And anyway, I wrote something about that, and that was really what I was so excited to talk to you about today and get an insight into the women behind this amazing music that I've been enjoying for so many years. So I'm going to try not to gush too much and be too much of a fanboy. And in that spirit, I'm going to ask my normal first question to get us off on the right start, which is, I would love to hear a little bit about where the Quebe Sisters came from in your music learning in particular. What were those early years like for you in music?
Well, she's looking at me, so I'll answer this. By the way, Christopher, we really appreciate you having us on the show.
Yeah.
Your whole organization is really cool, what you're all about. So with that being said, I'll try to give you kind of a brief, quick outline of where we got started and how we are here today. We, we went to a fiddle contest, not really knowing much about fiddling or anything, in North Texas. It was at the North Texas State Fair. And we heard, we heard other kids our age playing.
Mm-hmm.
And we had been playing the violin for, what do y'all think? Maybe like 6 months? Maybe
it was around a year.
Something like that. We were doing the Suzuki method, which is really great for ear training,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the beginning. And
we honestly really just did the ear training, and y'all read a little bit, but I honestly didn't really.
It was more of just like, this note is moving up and this one's moving down, but I can hear, we just listen to the recordings a lot. And so I think that method's really great for getting a young musician started with getting their ears going. And so we just went to check out the fiddle contest, and, we were really impressed by like other kids and other adults like playing, these cool tunes on the same instrument that we played. And so we went and started taking some lessons, and it sort of snowballed from there, with fiddling and fiddle contests and then playing together.
And for those in our audience who maybe aren't country aficionados or folk aficionados, they may be wondering, how is it the same instrument, violin and fiddle? Are they different? Are they the same? Could you just explain what a fiddle contest was versus a violin competition, maybe?
That's a good question.
Well, they're generally really casual and fun kind of things. A lot of them are outdoors, and it's just, they'll have age groups. So they'll have kids age groups, and then they'll have adult groups, and then they'll, just throughout the day, they go through those groups. You play a breakdown, a waltz, and a tune of choice. So you play a variety of different styles of Texas style fiddling. And then that is for Texas style fiddle contests. There's old time fiddle contests, different styles of fiddle contest, and you just compete and then have fun visiting with your friends.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of jamming and stuff that happens, afterwards and at night, and so that's a lot of the culture of fiddle contests. And contests have changed, a lot over the years, but that's still a big part of it. So that's kind of our first introduction to music and musicians.
Yeah,
this contest.
Interesting. Okay, so you were able to see this violin that you guys had been played in presumably quite a different way than the Suzuki tapes had been demonstrating. And were you taking part at that stage, or you just went and you were inspired?
We just went and we were just, we just went and listened. Yeah, we just went and listened. When we heard everybody playing, we're like, no, we're not entering the contest. We don't know what we're doing. But we just hung out and we were in the audience. Just soaked it in,
And one thing I'm always curious about is the kind of home environment musicians are coming from. Some people are born into musical families that expect them to go on and become pros, others not at all. It sounds like the three of you were all learning violin at the same time.
We did, yeah. Usually it would be like the oldest starts and then the middle and the youngest and all that. But no, we started on the same day playing Suzuki method, and then we also started taking fiddle lessons on the same day. And we would always we didn't take a ton of lessons in the beginning because we lived a ways from our teachers. So we would just go like once a month. And we would all sit in the same room. Yeah. So we were all like working on the same material. And that's honestly how I think the band kind of got started for us, was that once we had done the contest thing for a while, we were all working and learning on the same music. And so it made sense for us to start working on arrangements and stuff like that. And so working on, here's the lead, here's the high, here's the low, and just learning harmony, and making arrangements. And then it was like, once you work up some arrangements, you go play them somewhere. So we just started playing little gigs around, when we were pretty young. And our first album was an all instrumental album because we didn't sing, we just fiddled. So
that was pre-vocals.
Those pre-vocals, yeah. I think we recorded that. What year did we record that, guys?
2003, yeah.
Yeah, so I would have been 12.
Yeah.
Amazing. And what you just described there, the lessons together, the figuring some things out by ear, the getting into arranging 3-part harmony so early on in your instrument learning, is that normal in that context of learning fiddle? in kind of a Texas country style, or was that unusual?
I think what was normal about it, in the sense of like, twin fiddling has been something that a lot of people will just do, mostly just kind of casual. Like sometimes there's a twin fiddle division at some contest, and so people will quickly like be like, "Hey, I'm going to play this part, and do you know this song?" And I'll work out a quick harmony. And it's not real. It's not as like,
it's not super competitive, but it's really fun.
But it's just something fun to just do like a duo with somebody. And then, so in that sense, that has had a foothold in the tradition of fiddle contests and so forth. But triple fiddles, though, is not something you see very often. We're kind of us, and maybe the Time Jumpers, they have triple fiddles, or
occasionally,
only groups out there that have triple fiddles. And we had triple fiddles.
Well, there's probably somebody else.
Yeah, there probably is. I know, I shouldn't say the only, but I think we started doing triple fiddles because there were three of us in one house playing the fiddles. So it's just kind of the natural thing to occur. But we got that from listening to Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys, because he had triple fiddles. He had twin fiddles and triple fiddles always in his band. So that's where we kind of started picking up that tradition. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, you said something there about how you might just get together with someone in a duo and work out a harmony part on the spot that I definitely want to circle back to in due course and talk about what that actually looks like. But those early years when you were learning, clearly you got very good very quickly. And I was reading past interviews with you and articles about you, and there were some really interesting comments. There was one from Sherry McKenzie, who I believe was one of your early teachers. Is that right? And she said, sure, they were talented, but more importantly, they were determined and studious. They aren't prodigies, they just work really hard. And I was wondering, is that something you'd agree with? Was it hard work to become as good as you became so quickly?
I mean, that's very kind, especially from a teacher, to say, it makes you feel good as a student for your teacher to say, you're working hard. So, I think having the three of us to, like Hulda was saying, we all started at the same time, and having the three of us all playing together really kept us going, and it kept us inspired and kind of set a pace, so that, it's harder, I think, when there's just one kid and nobody else in the family plays, and no one else in our family plays anything. Our mom is very musically talented, and she wanted to get us started playing an instrument. But
she doesn't actually play an instrument, but she does have really good ears.
She does. And so, we can thank her. But we had each other. So that really kept us going and kind of motivated us, to push through hard times.
Yeah. And yes, I don't think that we're musical prodigies or anything.
No, not at all.
But, if you enjoy it and you like are into something, you can learn almost anything. That's kind of how I look at it. Yeah.
Interesting. And that's certainly something that's come through when I've watched you guys being interviewed or read about you, is that, you weren't driven by wanting to become pop stars or pass exams or get into a conservatory. You were studious in those years because it sounds like you genuinely really were thrilled by what you were learning.
It was the late 1990s and early 2000s. Fiddle wasn't like the most popular thing, so
you have to be into it.
You have to kind of be into it to want to do it. It's actually a lot, with like acoustic music and the resurgence of it coming out. Starting with like bluegrass getting popular, like in the the early 2000s, mid 2000s, and kind of bubbling over. Now, like acoustic music's kind of really coming back, which is cool. But now people are like, oh, whoa, you play fiddle, that's cool. And I'm like, haha, I was a child, it was not.
And you mentioned that you got to recording your first album before vocals really entered the picture. Had you not been performing as vocalists, or had you literally not been even singing together up until that point?
We didn't sing at all, and we didn't sing together. And it was really, we made our first record that Hulda was mentioning because we would play little gigs and people would say, oh, do you have a CD? Do you have any recordings? And we were always like, no, we don't. And enough of our friends and people that liked what we did were were saying, y'all should record it. Y'all should record some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we did, so that we'd have something to sell at our gigs, and people bought it. So we're like, well, we'll make another one, I guess. And well, it was actually after that we got some encouragement from some great musicians we know to start singing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we practiced singing, and really we just started singing the harmonies that we were already playing on fiddle.
Mm-hmm.
And that helped immensely to already have an ear that was sort of trained for harmony, to listen for parts when we went to start singing. But we were terrible. And we said to ourselves, we'll sing if we like it and if we sound good. And it was really a struggle at first.
Neither one of those happened at the beginning.
So we ended up singing and practicing for a year before we ever sang on stage. And then before we went for our first, we had a specific performance in mind, is like, this is where we're going to debut our singing and see how it goes. So before that, we practiced singing over a sound system. We were already used to playing over it, but it's so different hearing yourself back through monitors or through a PA.
That's a whole nother story right there.
Yeah,
it's just learning how to work as acoustic musicians on a PA system. But anyways, I butted it.
So we sang together for a year before we ever went out in public and sang, and that was really useful. And eventually we were like, I think we like this, so we kept going.
We're ready for it.
Amazing.
That was a big moment for us when we were like, okay, we're doing this. This is the gig. We're going to debut the vocals.
We're gonna sing.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to hear. So for me, your album Timeless was my first introduction to you, and it's one of my top 5 albums of all time. Love it. But from the outset then, I knew you guys as 3-part harmony singers and 3-part harmony fiddlers. And it's part of the magic of your group, I think, that you do those two things in tracks, and, the ear can kind of follow from the voices to the violins. It's amazing. But it's so fascinating to hear that actually the vocals was a relatively late addition to your sound and your skills.
Well, what, another thing that did inspire us to want to that kind of carried us through that period where, because like Sophia was going to tell a story. I know a story you're going to tell.
You can tell it.
Because we used to record all of our stuff on tapes, just like tapes and a tape player. And we get those little Sony cassettes. Thank you. That's the word. We have our early singing tapes labeled as Wretched Singing Tape number 1, Wretched Singing Tape number 2.
We recorded everything.
We recorded everything, and it sounds so bad. But anyways, I digress. The thing that honestly really inspired us to sing is we heard the Mills Brothers
and the Sons of the Pioneers.
We heard this, we were really into the Sons of the Pioneers, and but then I do remember Grace heard the Mills Brothers first, and I remember her coming home, and she goes, "Y'all are going to lose your minds. This group is amazing," and that they really did it for us, and they still are to us probably the best vocal group that's ever been.
The best harmony vocal
and
group.
Family harmony, their arrangements were so they're so amazing, and they would imitate instruments with their voices. And
to me, that the imitation thing that they did was just like an added bonus, but they were incredible just as musicians. But I digress. But that really is what got us into singing outside of people saying y'all should sing. So and that was a big factor for I remember
an inspiration.
Me. Yeah.
Gotcha. And I definitely want to come back and ask you what changed between Wretched Singing Tape number 1 and your first recorded album, and you're the height of your career now, or hopefully on the upward trajectory. But I'm curious. So I said to you before we hit record, it's a bit funny for me to get to talk to you because I know your voices so well and I've listened to you so much, but I've not had names to attach to each of the voices. I never had one of your physical CDs to have liner notes and who was singing the lead or that kind of thing. I don't know if those are even a thing anymore. But in kind of prepping for this interview, I think I've sleuthed it out. And I think, tell me if I'm wrong, I think Grace, as the oldest, you tend to sing the lowest part, and Hulda, as the youngest, you tend to sing the highest part. And was that true on fiddle and it then came across to voice? How true is that as a consistent thing? I'm just curious because I've followed your voices, and clearly you said you started out by singing your fiddle parts in harmony. What role do each of you play in the sense of that harmony?
When we were just playing instrumentally, and still to this day when we do an instrumental, we don't have to stick to a specific harmony part. We switch it around intentionally when we work up a song, just so that we have some variety in our lives. But when we started singing, that kind of changed things for us. And you're exactly right. I sang the low part, Hulda sang the lead. So by default, Hulda sang the high part. So by default, Sophia was the lead singer. And we did that for years and years. And it's only been in our most recent arrangements and on our new record that Hulda and I are singing lead parts. And
that's great.
And these days, as adults now, my speaking voice is actually higher and Hulda's is actually lower. So as soon as I get my high voice, vocal chops in shape, Hulda will turn over some of her parts to me.
We're slowly transitioning right now.
Yeah. So we'll probably end up singing those like switching, and Sophia's singing more harmonies going forward. But for now, we kind of share everything a little bit.
Interesting. And I'm really curious to know, I realize to you it's probably obvious and you take it for granted, but if we go back to that time, maybe the first year or so when you were starting to work on vocal harmony, what did the practicing for that look like? What kinds of things were you listening for or realizing, you thought sounded wretched? What kind of things was it?
Well, I'll talk about one.
Tell them about it.
Oh, of course, yes.
Because
okay, so the first phase of our vocals, we didn't know anything. Our fiddle teacher is just he sings too, but he's not like a singer per se. He's more of an instrumentalist, but he sort of coached us some in vocals. But then we went to Rosanna.
Honestly, what we were doing with vocals in the very beginning, especially with the Wretched Singing tapes, we were honestly just imitating, trying to just listen to the people we liked and imitate them.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
we just didn't have vocal technique, so we'd run out of air and we would, sing too loud, and we just didn't know.
Yeah.
But you learn. If you just open your mouth and start singing, you'll figure things out.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So a lot of those early years for us was just figuring it out. But actually, our bass player at the time, Drew Phelps, he was talking to us and he was like, y'all should go take a lesson, which we're so lucky that we have the University of North Texas, which is it's a school. It's near us. It's a college. And they have a great jazz program. So they have some really good teachers. We've actually found a lot of our bass players through that school. So they're great. But our bass player, Drew, said, hey, why don't y'all go take some lessons from the jazz vocal teacher? Her name is Rosanna Eckert. And
one of the best things that we ever did.
The best things ever. I'm like, Drew, thank you.
So for any of y'all, like aspiring vocalists out there, I would say find, a really good teacher and go take a couple lessons from them, because we didn't know, like when we made Timeless, I didn't even know that you had different ranges in your voice. So I didn't know there was a head voice and a mid range and then a chest voice. So in spite of our lack of, understanding of the voice and how it works and proper technique and all, we were able to get that album made. It was a miracle. But that's a great learning curve. A lot of musicians, a lot of my favorite singers are not really schooled per se. But if you follow what Hulda said, if you just really try to emulate the people that you like, and so I'll get to the Seth Briggs thing, but I think the best thing during the Wretched Singing phase was we just recorded our practices, and we recorded all of our lessons, and we listened back to them. And the thing is like hearing yourself on tape, especially when you're learning a new skill, it can be pretty rough, but it is liberating in the sense of like it tells you the truth, and then you really know how to improve and what to work on. And then when you hear yourself get a little bit better, like 2 weeks later or 3 months, 6 months later, you're like, oh, whoa, I can't believe like how much better I sound than then. Hearing it back can be discouraging in the moment for sure.
Yeah.
But it definitely is the key to really improving. And we had to work on things like, just pronunciation. We had the strongest Texas accents. It was just Twangville. And and that's cool.
We weren't trying to sift out our accent. We were just trying to make it sound good and mature and things like that.
And so working on things like pronunciation, when we went to Rosanna Eckert,
tell about speech levels.
Yes. She was like, hey, you should go buy this book by this extremely famous vocal coach named Seth Riggs. And he's out in California, and he wrote a book called Singing for the Stars, and it has an accompanying
Sounds
CD.
cheesy, but it's actually true.
You can buy it on Amazon. It's cheap. The book is one of the best vocal technique books. It's a complete program from A to Z, of just like getting your voice, trying to learn how to have a mixed voice, getting your ranges balanced, just basic little vocal techniques and things that really help. And that was just immensely huge for us. And then tell about going to see Seth. Oh my goodness. One day.
Well, you have to tell Seth accolades. He was Michael Jackson's vocal coach forever. And he
worked with Stevie Wonder,
and like Natalie Cole.
Yeah.
When it says Singing for the Stars, he truly was the vocal coach for Stars. It's incredible.
Grace wants me to tell this story that we had a gig out in LA, and so I thought, you know what? I want to see if I can get a lesson with Seth Riggs. And he was 82 at the time, but he was still teaching. And I thought, oh my goodness, how incredible.
He may still be teaching.
He
probably is.
But he has the Fountain of Youth or something going on. But I picked up the phone one morning, and it's 2 hours earlier from Texas to California, and he answered the phone. He was in his office, and he has a separate office in his backyard, beautiful place. And he just picked up the phone, and I almost just passed out. It was Seth Riggs on the phone, and we set up a lesson, and we had an hour with him, and it was incredible. Mm-hmm. He ran us through our vocal ranges, talked to us about, proper pronunciation and bridging your voice breaks. And
one of the best hours ever of instruction.
So
incredible.
That was immensely helpful.
Yeah. And we're still learning all of these technique things.
Oh, sure.
Especially with us trying to switch parts and different things, where some of our ranges, like me, sometimes I tend to get stuck in head voice too much. And then sometimes Grace gets too stuck in chest. So she and I are working on stretching our mixes now. So, there's stuff on our new record that, we took chances and saying things that we were kind of out of our comfort zones, if you will. And so that was a big challenge for us for our latest record. And we're really happy with how it came out. But we of course, we always listen back and we're like, the next one's going to be better. So surprise.
Exactly.
Fantastic. And I'm curious to know, you said you took some lessons with a jazz vocal teacher. Some people would see jazz and country as almost polar opposites in terms of style. Why a jazz vocal teacher?
Really, we already knew stylistically what songs we wanted our songs to sound like. Mm-hmm. So we honestly went for technique lessons. Mm-hmm. And our teacher that Sophia was mentioning, Rosanna Eckert, is fantastic.
She actually just wrote a book too.
Yeah, she did. And so she would just helped us with technique, because the technique, no matter what you're singing, will apply and help you. So really, it was, if you have a good technique, then you can just plug it in where you need it.
Exactly.
That's what she was teaching us.
Yes. We never learned any songs. We sang our own songs when we go into lessons and stuff. And she was just like, what do you want to work on?
Yeah. I think that's what's really special about the speech level singing technique is exactly what Grace said. It's it's not genre specific. And we were wanting to find a teacher that could help us with our genres, but we didn't know a lot of people that specialize in the music of the Sons of the Pioneers.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Anyways.
Gotcha. And if you don't mind me asking, how did a trio of fairly young women put all of that together? Like, clearly you were studious and diligent, but, you know, you were choosing repertoire, you were learning fiddle and improving, you were arranging things, you were learning to sing as well as fiddle at a top level. You were, I think, already touring quite a lot. Did you have like a strong manager who was helping you stay organized? Because I know at that age I was not I would not have been capable of half of that.
I mean, the three of us didn't have like a goal of like starting a band when we started playing. We were just playing music, and that was just part of our daily life. And it was really just because, like Holder Sophia was saying, we took lessons together, and we would sit in on each other's lesson part of that. And so we kind of stayed up to speed. And then our teacher was like, you know, why don't y'all learn something in harmony? That'd be fun. And we're like, yeah, that sounds fun. Mm-hmm. So we started playing together, and it really was our teacher, Joey McKenzie, who was, you know, had in his mind, like, this would be a good song as a next song to learn. This next song that will work out will teach you this next skill. Mm-hmm. And so those kind of things, it was really his thinking ahead and being like, this would build on this. Mm-hmm. And then helping us, you know, go out and play. And he would play with us, as you know, and he played in our band for years. So it was really him that got us going.
Yeah. And he did our arrangements for us while he was in the band and everything.
But we did it, we learned because we did it during our lessons. Mm-hmm. So he would work out stuff and we would learn it, and then he would work out another part. So we really learned just by watching and doing it with him, how that works.
And I think for people that are, you know, students, because everybody's different and not everyone has access to a great teacher, or you can't afford it, you know, there's elements of those things that play. But I think if you really do want to study music, being able to find people just to play with that are maybe, you know, a little bit better than you or a lot better than you. And people that maybe they're not exactly into your style of music, but at least you can play together and, you know, bounce things off each other and learn. Because, you know, not everyone has access to a teacher. But for us, I think also a big thing to add on to what Grace said is they really introduced us to a lot of different music. Mm-hmm. And that honestly is probably the biggest thing that, looking back, I'm like, well, how did we get into these styles of music? Because our family didn't play music. You know, our mom liked music, but it wasn't like a huge thing in our household. Yeah. So it wasn't like, you know, our parents had some amazing record collection and we found all this stuff. But it was really our teachers just going, well, you like fiddle, you like fiddle music. Why don't you listen to Western swing? Why don't you listen to swing music? Why don't you listen to some jazz? Why don't you listen to some country? I remember we had a bass player, this guy that was playing bass with us. He was really nice. And his name was Mike Grimes. He was such a sweetheart. But he introduced us to the Beatles. He was like, I think you girls would like this record. Here's Sgt. Pepper's. We were just like, what is this? I remember we went into our lesson and we were like, hey, Joey, Sherry, have you heard of this band called the Beatles? And I just remember the looks on their faces were like, yeah, yes, we have. They're really good. And the obsession began from there with like not only listening to American roots music, but like listening to, you know, rock and roll. And
we were listening to Ella Fitzgerald too early on.
They really did curate and introduce us to people. Like Sherry was the one that pulled out the Mills Brothers and was like, you would like this.
They burned off CDs and they would give us, now I know.
We're not supposed to do that.
Well, just, you know, as good.
But they would rip records and take records that's like recordings that you can't find, or, you know, this is also early 2000s. So,
well, when I mean burned off CDs, I'm saying like make compilation CDs of like, this is the best of George Jones, or this is the best of like, you know, the Sons of the Pioneers or Fair and Young. And so we got we got, a catalog of music as young musicians, just learning, soaking things in, that really, I think, set us up for just developing your ear. And I think it's also really important to listen to really try to listen to kind of the highest quality of whatever music is available in that genre that you're interested in. Because whatever you listen to really does, it seeps into you and it's going to come out in your playing. So it's just sort of like,
it's building your taste.
It's basically building your taste. It's really important just to build good taste. And I think that's what you were saying. They really introduced us to a lot of great music, and that shaped us.
Yeah.
That's so interesting to hear. And I love that you mentioned the Beatles there. We did a series of episodes on this show earlier this year all about the Beatles, where I interviewed the world's top experts on the Beatles to try and figure out where did these aliens come from and how were they so incredible? And I think you'd be pleased to hear, if I had to sum up in one line the conclusion of that series, it was they spent 5 years exposing themselves to all kinds of different music and getting incredible ears, and everything kind of followed from there. And it sounds like you had a similar experience there, where you weren't just, because Joey, I believe, was a champion, multi-time champion fiddle player, right? World champion. So it wasn't just that you had an amazing teacher, it was also that they were exposing you in this way to a much broader range than just the style you knew you wanted to do.
And then once the internet entered our home and we had a computer, and then it was oh, well, let's start what we really do. And honestly, literally, this is what I do today. Whenever I get into an artist, we all three do this, is you get into somebody, you hear a song, and then you're oh, I love this. Well, I go to Wikipedia and I read who were their influences, who did they talk about? And then it's just backtracking, because that's how we found the Boswell sisters. I remember we were listening to Ella Fitzgerald, and I Googled her, and she said one of her favorite vocalists was Connie Boswell, which the Boswell sisters, for your listeners and viewers, they were also a 3-sister sibling act. And they were really early in the days of early jazz. And so, but their arranging was very progressive. So vocal-wise for sure. And they were great vocalists. So anyways, Connie Boswell was a huge influence on Ella. So I was well, of course I'm going to go listen to Connie. So that's what we did. And I still do that to this day. That's the never ending fun of the internet.
That's awesome. The Quebe Sisters were how I discovered the Andrews Sisters, was how I discovered the Boswell Sisters. So that's awesome.
Oh, cool.
I'd love to talk a bit about your style then. So you were immersed in this world of Texas-style fiddling and being exposed to all kinds of different music. And these days, I believe you would describe your style as progressive Western swing. Can you explain for the listener what that means? What kind of music are we talking about? Because I'm sure by this point, if they haven't already run off to quebesisters.com to hear, they're wondering, what does this all sound like?
Well, the reason we give that moniker to what we do is because I feel like what we're doing in our band is really keeping alive the tradition that was really started by Bob Wills. And that is, he took everything that was presently around him and all of his influences and put them together. And so today, if we're really going to be authentic to Western swing, you have to keep bringing in. And we've spent many years listening and working to play stylistically correct. But then we want to not just play those old songs exactly in the same way or only play those old songs, because that's not stylistically what they were doing. That makes the style into a museum piece. And if we want it to be alive in the future, which we love Western swing, we do. So we want to keep bringing stuff in. We want to keep we want to be just like they were, which is, where are we right now? What are our influences?
We want to be relatable today.
Play from our roots and then bring stuff in. And that's why it was popular. It was pop music of its time.
Oh, yeah.
And so, I mean, I think the way to keep it alive is it should be, flourishing right now. So we want to be exactly like them. And because there is a lot of, I would say a lot of recordings out there in the Western swing category, we just want to kind of give ourselves a bit of differentiation or a bit of explanation for folks that might think Western swing and just think, oh, I'm only going to hear Bob Wills arrangements or something, to kind of give them a heads up. Hey, you are going to hear that. I mean, obviously we play triple fiddles, but you're also going to hear us bringing in new stuff and trying to keep it fresh.
New songs, yeah.
Gotcha. And for the death metal fans in our audience who've never heard Western swing, what does Western swing mean? Like, what kind of music are we talking about here? It's something related to country, clearly, but what would define it?
I would say Western swing it's an amalgamation of the blues, folk for like the most broad term, like old time, like string band, where it was just like banjos and guitars and that sort of thing. Not bluegrass, like early string
like
band,
Jimmy Rogers,
early string band kind of music. And then Western swing brought in drums because it was extremely influenced by the pop music of the day, which was like swing. It was the big band era. It was like Benny Goodman. And so they were like the country version of Benny Goodman. Bob Wills actually wanted to call it country jazz, and it got dubbed Western swing, and that name stuck. But it was basically swing music played on country instruments, and it was a mixture between hard percussion like the big bands had, acoustic string instruments, and electrified instruments, which was something that had never really been blended together. So like the steel guitar kind of got its
Hawaiian music was brought in because they were musicians that went to war and they traveled across different places and they found steel guitar and, stationed in Hawaii and different things like that. And so they brought that back. Guitar players started playing steel guitar. So that's and one day we would love to have a steel guitar in our band. That might be a next step for us.
But back to Western swing, there's a couple genres she missed. So there's also Western music. You mentioned swing music. I feel like that a big influence. Yes,
blues. I did mention blues.
A big influence on Western swing is just geographically where it's located. There's a lot of cool Spanish tunes in the music too, and there's a lot of influence. So you hear like Spanish two-step,
mariachi tunes
like Jesse Polka. All of those they're in Texas style fiddling, and they're also in Western swing. So there's a big influence of that as well. So they took their regional, and then they took whatever they heard on records and just stuffed it all in there.
It's really truly like a melting pot, which is kind of funny because rock and roll did kind of kill Western swing as far as the popularity of it, because everyone heard rock and roll and they went into that, and the dance style changed, because Western swing is basically, at the end of the day, it's dance music. Just like all the other styles that they were mentioning are all dance styles. So, but the dance style changed. And I was actually talking to a friend of mine. His name is Ray Bingham. He's a booker and he books tons of people. But
booking agent.
Yeah, he's a booking agent, not a booker. That sounds like gambling. But no, I was just talking to him, and he goes, "Yeah, when Western swing kind of got killed off by rock and roll, and he kind of lived it." Because he's a little bit older. And so I just thought that was an interesting way of describing like why it kind of isn't as popular now. But I feel like especially with the way acoustic music is going, it's a really cool time for us to be a band, because so many people in their own way are because everyone has access to everything now because of the internet. Everyone's kind of throwing different things into their style. So, like bluegrass has gotten really progressive. So for us to say we're a progressive Western swing band it's fun. And I feel like and a lot of festivals and stuff are being really open-minded to having us. Bluegrass festivals are now hiring this Western swing band to come play. And we fit in at folk festivals and, all kinds of different things. And we played a blues cruise. We played Delmont Clinton's cruise, that was so fun. And we're not a blues band. So, for them to have us, it just kind of felt like a good validation that what we're trying to aspire to do, people are getting excited about, which is cool.
Yeah.
It's so cool to hear about that. And to me, like country is a genre where the artists of today are particularly respectful of everyone that's gone before them, like much more so than you'd see in rock and roll or pop. Like there's a real reverence, I feel, for the traditions of country, and rightly so. But it's so cool to hear that actually that progressive nature and that melting pot that you guys are bringing to the table is actually right there in the roots. It's not that you're, going against the tradition. You're very much keeping to it.
Yeah, they were writing songs, and they weren't just like, oh, this is our little pool of repertoire and we're only going to play out of that. They were writing songs and, throwing in new instruments and shaking things up.
I mean, Bob Wills was the first person to bring drums on the Grand Ole Opry.
Yeah.
And if anyone knows the history of the Grand Ole Opry, it's like the mother radio show of all country music. And it's like, wow. So, yeah, that kind of sums it up.
Pretty cool.
Awesome. Well, I want to hear maybe some of the specifics or examples of what you guys are bringing to the mix now when we talk in a moment about your new album. But before we do, I'd love to talk a little bit more about harmony, because we've touched on the fact that you guys started out with Joey, your teacher, arranging them with you, arranging the songs and the harmony parts. But you also made reference to how, at a festival, you might just get together with another fiddle player and figure out some harmony. And I think what our audience would be most curious to know is, how do you guys think about harmony? Are you coming at it, for example, from a very music theory perspective, where you're thinking about what the chord is and what the progressions are allowed to be? Are you thinking in terms of intervals? Are you just trusting your ear and experimenting? What does it look like for you guys to put together a new arrangement?
I'm going to let Sophia answer this. Me personally, I do everything by ear. I'm not that educated when it comes to chords and things. I'm actually in the process of learning more about that. It's not an element of music that comes easily to me, if we're being real honest. But all the harmony and chords and stuff, I do, especially because we have been exposed to so much of the music that I just kind of naturally think. And I'm starting now to learn, like, where my ear naturally goes in arranging. Mm-hmm. It's like, that's a common thing in Western swing, like 6 chords and all that stuff. So that's me. But Sophia and Grace too, can talk more about it. And I'm learning. So I just kind of take a second step to them on this one.
Well, so about our harmonies, Hulda kind of gave you the foundation there. We have always just done everything by ear. But over the past few years, I've started to teach myself some piano and guitar chords and stuff, so that I think that it's really important to start to get a grasp of the chords that you're working with, just because it can start to open up new ways to stack harmonies, with if you put the lead in the middle, which is what we typically do with our vocals at least, and then have a third above, and maybe a fifth below. That's often how we stack things, but we're experimenting now with other ways to stack things. We're experimenting with harmonies that aren't necessarily parallel. I call it parallel. I don't know if that's the textbook term, but it's basically like the harmonies follow exactly where the melody is going. But some songs, just for diversity, we're doing harmonies that sort of weave in and out of each other. And that's really beautiful.
Playing with octaves too. Like sometimes taking a second harmony, and since Grace and I are trying to switch parts, actually what I've been doing in order to kind of take our sound and make it a little less high sounding, because we're all three with the I guess we all have what you would say soprano voices. Mm-hmm. So what I've done recently on especially some of our old arrangements is just take my second harmony and sing a low octave of it. And, some of the notes are a little too low, but, for a live show, you can ghost 1 or 2 notes. But of course, on recordings, you can't do that. But that's kind of been a fun thing that I've been doing recently.
But I think now it's when we're working on arrangements now, I think what we generally do first is, if we want to do it, let's say, if we want to kind of follow the way we have done it, as far as where our strengths lie, Hulda's really fast with hearing the high harmony part. you can grab those real quick. Grace is really fast with grabbing the low harmony part. I feel like my ear hears harmony really well, but I've sung tons of lead. But one thing I always did was I always followed everything that my sisters were doing and kind of like memorized it along with them, just because I wanted to know and hear what was going on.
We can play each other's parts.
Yeah. And so that, that just develops your ears. I think now when we're trying to branch out from sort of like the way we used to always stack a harmony, sandwich harmony with the lead in the middle and sort of like the parallel, sometimes it does, most of the time we can just let our ears tell us what we want, what we need to do. But sometimes you'll run into a spot where there's several different chord inversions that you could try. And so our bass player, Daniel Parr, and our guitarist, Simon Stipp, they'll sit there and they'll try all kinds of different chords. And when we get to a place with the song that we're satisfied and they're satisfied is the rhythm section with the chord voicings that they're using and choices for the song, then we'll go, okay, now in this one spot where, there's several different ways you could do the harmony, now we got the chord nailed down. And then usually we just hear what it is. Simon will play or Dan will play on the piano. He's a good piano player.
Yeah, he is.
And if we get stumped though, Dan is actually, he's a very good musician. And he'll go to the piano and he'll be like, maybe one of you try this note or that note. But a lot of times we can hear it, even though we might not technically know all the theory behind it.
Yeah.
But we're getting to a point where just writing off our ears is holding us back a little bit. So that's why we're all trying to learn some theory and that sort of thing, because it just can kind of, ears are the most important thing when it comes to hearing harmony. But the second thing is just a little bit of knowledge of what's going on can help just open up more different ways to approach your harmony and different.
Well, it was fun for the album
and stuff.
We did a song called, Sophia and Dan wrote, and we were kind of all involved with, just listening and bouncing back ideas. But it's a song called Load at 7, Leave at 8. It's an instrumental tune. It's just fun. And the inspiration for that song originally was we were just listening to a lot of steel guitar players. And we were like, it'd be fun to do something that had, maybe a sound that, we can kind of echo a little bit what a steel guitar would sound like in the way that we write the song and in the way that we arrange the harmonies and the parts over it. So, we had we just were, it was basically just riff-based arranging. So we were just kind of playing and coming up with ideas, and we would listen to some recordings and, there's so many great, that's a subgenre of a subgenre, but instrumental steel guitar music.
So cool.
And it's really cool.
That tune was more of like, we wanted to write, Dan and I were like, let's write a Western swing instrumental.
Yeah.
So we went and listened to a bunch of stuff. And then we were like, well, blues form is probably one of the easiest forms to just start humming ideas over. So we started just like, humming things and, just noodling around on our instruments and stuff, and then recording licks and ideas and putting it together. And then we did some steel guitar stuff and threw it in there. And, you can just draw. Steel guitar has really weird harmony. Now that Load at 7 doesn't have that much weird harmony in it. But we did.
That was the original idea.
That's true.
And then it kind of led into, and it morphed in, which, that's how all writing and arranging goes.
A lot of it is editing out what doesn't work, You have to be willing. I love this quote from Paul McCartney where he was like, having a co-writer, he was talking about John Lennon, he's like, you just need somebody to tell you when it's rubbish. I was like, what a great way to look at it. It's so true, with your bandmates or whatever.
Gotcha. And
so
that's so cool to get an insight into how you guys approach arranging. And that wretched singing tapes era is sticking in my head, because you said, the ears are the most important thing. And clearly at that point you had an ear for harmony from playing fiddle where, the tuning of each note is 100% up to you. And literally one of my happiest memories in my 20s is when I first started doing ear training and my ear started waking up, and I would listen to that Timeless album and a track like Georgia on My Mind, and I would just be like, wow. But it was really challenging because, there are moments where your voices blend so beautifully, it can be hard to pick apart the three notes and to follow just one of them or to understand what's the relationship between them. And that makes me want to ask, like, clearly at that time, you had the ear to be singing the right notes and getting them in tune, like in a technical sense. But something we talk about a lot here on the show is that, you know, music, really great music making isn't just about hitting the right notes at the right time. There's a lot more to it and a lot more to the difference between a good performance and an amazing one. And I wonder if you can think back or even think about it now and the transition you've all gone through in terms of your style. What do you listen for and what have you improved in to go from those earliest days where you were probably technically correct but not happy with how it was sounding to how you sound now?
Yeah. Grace, you got to talk about our Duffy.
Oh,
you have to talk about Duffy.
So in making our recent record, we really wanted to have a great dance feel. And we feel like we're still striving for that as a band. But we wanted to find, we want to be authentic in that respect, because that's where Western swing is, that's its bedrock, is dance music. And so we felt like, because people aren't going out and dancing to music, we play, concert.
Yeah, it's turned into a concert hall
and
type
so
music.
It's not the same thing anymore. It's not the same venues. And so for us, we're kind of fish out of water trying to learn it. It's not like we just get on the bandstand with older musicians and they show us and we learn and, so we were really fortunate that our bass player, Daniel Parr, like you mentioned, he was doing some research and came across a YouTube comment mentioning this great drummer named Duffy Jackson. And so he started looking him up and found these amazing videos of him playing with Count Basie. And then we started trying to find where he was, and Dan got in touch with him. He lives in Nashville. Mm-hmm. And we've made several trips out there over the past year to see him. And we sat down with him and just learned a wealth of information from him. And to hear him play, he's still playing amazing. Mm-hmm. And to hear him play and to hear his stories about starting with Ella Fitzgerald it's amazing. And then really, but to feel him play is what you start to feel. This is what dance music is supposed to feel like when it's live. And so that has been a huge influence on our rhythm section and ourselves as well. We've studied it all together just as much. But having like the whole band focusing on that same thing has been really, really revolutionary. And we're still on that road. We feel like we got some of that feel and like a happiness in our new album, but it's not like pure raging swing music. But one of these days, hopefully, that people will just get up and start dancing at our shows because we can't help it.
Yeah, that's honestly our goal.
Yeah.
But what Grace was saying and what you were asking, talking about, you're saying, harmony is more than just notes and intonation. And for us, with our new arranging, with the songs that we picked, just everything, this kind of shift for us with this new album started with us with the feel thing. And I know it sounds kind of, it's hard to kind of explain a little bit, but we were approaching everything from a feel-based mindset. So all of the way that we sing together, we used to say things like, well, we need to be tight. Well, we need to be together, or
you're dragging,
or you're dragging, or you're rushing. And so different things like that, the typical things that you would think of that you would need to work on when you're singing, close harmony of different forms and shapes. Or playing. Yeah. But you do need to think about some of those things, but we're learning, and especially working with Duffy, that the more you understand about rhythm, that actually the better the groove, the better you sing together. But it's not where, because we used to do things like the lead person, we're going to follow you as harmony singers. I need to follow whatever Sophia leads. Well, now we're learning that if Sophia she's in the right pocket, I don't need to follow her anymore. We will automatically sync up. And so a lot of just the way that we worked on the album, everything, all the technical elements, we have put them through the lens of feel, if that makes any sense.
Specifically, the feel that Hulda is talking about. I mean, we're talking about swing feel. We're talking about a triplet-based feel. And growing up, in a non-dance environment, there are things that have been lost, and we're trying to get those back, because we miss, when we hear our playing, we miss that we feel from the old recordings. So I remember one of the most revolutionary things Steffi's ever told us was, that the band is syncing, it's not the 1 and the 3, it's the leads of a triplet. So if a triplet's like doodly, it's doodly. So yeah. So it's like this moving thing. So you can have like the low end has this continuity to it, and the 1 can move. It's not a metronomic thing. So if you're going to try to do swing music, what the whole band is anchoring on is like the lead, the end of the triplet, 1 end up, 2 end up.
So I guess for the listeners, if this sounds like gibberish, it'd be like if you have like a bar of rhythm. So like a quarter note would be like 1, 2, 3, 4. If you think of the ands, but you swing them, it's like a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 1. And inside of that is a triplet. So a do, lee do, lee do, lee do, lee do. And so Jeffy just was giving us these basic things. We don't feel like we have it down yet, but if you go back to like tying all of this into like what you're listening for, and then Grace, I didn't want to hijack your story. You can go back to that. But it really, learning this stuff has changed how we listen to music
and how we talk
listen
about
to
it
each other while we're playing with each other.
So it's really influenced.
It's a lot more fun way to practice.
The vocabulary that we use as a band. It's been really fun, and we've all done it together, which I feel like is one of the reasons why we were able to go in the studio. It was also part of the reason we did this. We had a goal to go in and record all together in one room, and we were so fortunate to find the studio where in Austin. It's an amazing place, and all their gear, everything, nothing that we used in the whole session, I think is any newer than like the 40s. It's all amazing vintage gear. And so obviously it's going to come out sounding like an old record, but in order for it to feel like an old record,
we had to play.
Yeah, and in order for us to be able to do it all together in one room, the whole band had to be like focused on feeling stuff the same way. So we've all been doing this together and growing, and that's been really fun.
Yeah. And I feel like as you start to be more aware of feel, and when we say feel, we're talking about how does it make you feel when you listen to like your favorite records. One of my favorite songs that we were listening to for inspiration I'll jump back to, or you could tell them about like the song list that we had for.
Oh yeah, where is that?
But jumping back to kind of what Hulda was saying, all the songs that we listened to for inspiration, particularly there's this one tune called Moanin' that was written by this great jazz piano player named Bobby Timmons, and that recording is with Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. And that recording of Moanin' is so great. And we listened to that a lot because it helped us get the feel for one of the songs that we were doing, Lullaby of the Leaves. And we're nowhere as good as Art Blakey and his band, but you can dream, right? And but we listened to that, and we would sit there and we would just groove before we started the song. And you start to feel like you don't try to make your body move, you just let your body move to the music however it wants to move to the music. And then you pick up your instrument and you count off the song, and you try to just keep that same feeling going. Because often we realized when we started to play, our attentions and our efforts would go in to trying to execute the song. You have all these desires and and how you want it to sound, and I'm worried
about performance,
and
related stuff,
and you get away from like the pure flow of the music coming out, and you actually hinder your own groove. And so we used a lot of these songs to try to, as a little, because we feel like we're beginners at it. It's sort of like a little runway to get you going. And I think it's not only a really fun way to practice and it's inspiring, but it really helps you tap into the real artistry of what's going on beneath all of the mechanics of, just playing the song and trying to be in tune and stuff like that,
Yeah.
Fantastic. I'm sure our audience are already convinced to run off to quebesisters.com and or Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, wherever they can buy the new album, which is self-titled The Quebe Sisters. But I wonder if we can just tell them a little bit more to whet their appetite. If they're in the car driving and they can't do that right now, let's get them even more excited. And it was really cool to hear a little bit of the story behind Load at 7, Leave at 8. Are there any other kind of origin stories of the songs, or songs that demonstrate how you guys are bringing a new flair to Western swing or anything like that?
Yeah, the album, it definitely does have a diverse kind of song list on it. One song was written by Jesse Harris, great songwriter. He's wrote for Norah Jones, Willie Nelson supported his stuff, so he sent us some tunes, and it's called Always Seem to Get Things Wrong. It was not a Western swing tune, it was just a singer-songwriter. I mean, you can go pull it up on Spotify and listen to Willie's version of it, but we heard it and we said, yeah, we could turn this into something that's a Western swing tune. So that was fun for us. That was new. Lullaby of the Leaves is a swing tune. But we,
jazz
like an old jazz tune, but we did it, a little bit more Western swing feel. The original, we have some originals on the album. One of them was tune that you wrote, My Love, My Life, My Friend. It's a great song. And Sophia just wrote it, and you brought it to the table. You were playing guitar. And it was just it sounded just like a country tune, like
just
maybe
a simple country tune.
Yeah, just a simple country tune. And it was either me or it might have been Grace, I don't remember. But we said, why don't you turn that to a country shuffle? Because shuffle music was probably my favorite genre as a child growing up. And I'm being for real.
You got to tell them what shuffle music is.
Shuffle music is like Ray Price. That is Ray Price Nightlife country shuffle.
There's jazz shuffle and blues shuffle. That's a great country shuffle.
Yeah. Ray Price Nightlife album. That's a great country shuffle album. There are a lot of country shuffle artists. Ray Price being probably the pinnacle. There's Farron Young. There's all these different artists, but we love Johnny Paycheck. Love Paycheck. And we listen to them a lot because they have a lot of fiddling. There's a great fiddle player. His name is Tommy Jackson. And he kind of started the country shuffle fiddling. And it was this single note kind of long bow fiddling. If you're really nerdy about styles, it's different than Texas style. It's different than old time.
Or Western swing.
It is its own thing. We really got into that. But triple fiddles are also popular in country shuffle music. So when we first started out playing, I think we played shuffles really early on because we've always liked shuffles. So when Sophia brought that tune to the table, I was like, do it as a shuffle. And of course, Simon and Dan laid down a shuffle beat, and that's what it turned into. So
I thought that really kind of made it a little more interesting. And then we have 3 originals on the record, and then the third one is one called Pierce the Blue that I wrote. And it actually is a waltz. I didn't realize that until after it was written. And then I realized that it was actually a waltz, but it's more of I guess it is a country tune, but it doesn't really fall in that vein so much. It more has a little bit of, what would y'all say?
It's a little more singer-songwritery.
Yeah, it has a little bit of that element because, I probably was listening to some Bob Dylan at the time or something like that. And it has very
we listened to a lot of Willie Nelson songs.
Oh, yeah.
Songwriting, which is like
tons of
the pinnacle of country singer-songwriter music. I mean, like the IRS tapes is one of my favorite albums. It's just him and a guitar, and it's devastatingly gorgeous.
I think that like listening to Willie and his songwriting really influenced like that tune too. That, thank you for remembering that. But then, you know, I wasn't fully satisfied with all the lyrics, and so Grace, you know, we had a little writing session. She just threw me a bunch of really great ideas, and we built, you know, some lyrics off of that finished the song out. So that's one thing.
That's the story.
That's the story.
Fantastic. And you have videos, really great videos for My Love, My Life, My Friend and Pierce the Blue on YouTube now that I would definitely recommend people check out, because like I said, you know, I was about to say I grew up listening to your music. I'm not sure that's quite true. It was a bit more recent than that, but I listened to your music mostly just pure audio, but now we have YouTube. You can go and watch the Quebe Sisters perform. Speaking of which, are you out on tour? I know you're some of the busiest musicians I've come across in terms of tour dates, which I'm always like kicking myself for in the US rather than Europe, where I would be there. But what's coming up for you apart from the very exciting album release?
I mean, we're touring in Texas right now. We're going to be going to the East Coast some, and this fall we're going out to California. We actually just booked a bunch of dates in California. Just touring everywhere. New Mexico, Arizona.
We're going to be on a cruise in
January. Yeah, the Cayamo. Am I saying it right?
Yeah.
Cayamo cruise. That's going to be really fun. If anybody wants to splurge and come on a cruise with us, it is going to be really fun.
I mean, there's so many musicians on that cruise of all genres.
Oh, it's going to be great.
It's going to be really cool.
So we're staying busy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'd love to come back over to your side of the water.
Yeah.
We have had so much fun touring over in England and Europe, and hopefully we'll make it back over there.
We would love to.
It's a goal. It's probably, hopefully within the next couple of years we'll be able to do that. For sure.
Terrific. Well, I will be front and center, clearly, in the audience. Thank you so much, ladies. You have an album coming out tomorrow. I can't imagine how busy you are, but you've made the time today and shared so generously with our audience. So just a huge thank you, and a last recommendation for everyone to head to quebesisters.com. And of course, we'll have a link in the show notes to that to hear the new album, The Quebe Sisters. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
This was
Appreciate
fun.
it. Thanks, Christopher.
Oh, hey, one more thing. If you enjoyed this video, please take a second to like it on YouTube. And if you haven't already, please also subscribe to our channel there. That's going to help make sure you get all our latest videos as soon as they come out. And it also helps us reach more people, which means more episodes, better guests, and everybody wins. So please take a second to like this video and hit subscribe.